everybody, I'm Bree the Plant Lady, and today I am coming to you from the always gorgeous JCRA Arboretum on the edge of NC State's campus in downtown Raleigh, North Carolina. Now, it's actually been a year since I last visited. Thanks to COVID, the garden has actually remained closed since March. And we were here this morning getting videos for our brand new channel that I'm doing with HortTube Jim Putnam called No Rules Gardening. But I had a few extra minutes, so I thought that I would give you a quick behind the scenes winter interest tour from the view of my cell phone. The entrance of the Ralston Arboretum is really magical, and that is thanks to this pair of gorgeous mature live oaks. And they provide the shade that enables this wonderful collection of plants to grow underneath. And that includes beautiful ground covers like this cyclamen heterofolium ashwood. This is from Ashwood Nursery's silver leaf variety, and various species of ferns, and a serum, which is a native ginger. Actually, this one's probably not ginger, or not native. A serum maximum? No, that's from China. And then even different varieties of common plants, things like liriope and carax. These are all just really well-adjusted plants to grow in a shade space. Provide great winter interest. This grouping of variegated carax and the stinking hellebore, or Helleborus fetidus, is really quite extraordinary. But one plant that caught my eye in here that I've never paid any attention to is this really tall clumping liriope named for a wonderful plantsman, Lynn Lowry. You can't come to the Arboretum and not be fascinated by all the different Japanese maples they have. And that's just, even in the winter, when they don't have their leaves, the form is so interesting. And really, the collection of Acer is outrageous. It's so cool. Look at Acer sicifolium. I mean, look at the branching structure on that tree. It's so interesting. And of course, the Ralston Arboretum has a number of iconic plants, including this pair of Lagerstroemia farii. So this is the champion crepe myrtle. This is Fantasy, and you can see it's just got this massive trunk, and this is one that you should never ever murder. Let it grow up to be super tall and extraordinary, and ultimately this will provide you a significant amount of shade through the heat of the summer. So you know, every year is so different. And I just posted on Instagram last night some shots from my last visit here, which was 1 year ago. And the Prunus mumes were almost finished flowering. Now you can see they have just barely started. I'll get here to show you some bonita blooms, which this is a beautiful pink flower. And the fragrance is incredible. I'm coming back on Friday in hopes that maybe these will open more and we'll be able to get even better photographs. But look, there's a little bee getting some pollen. But you know, every year the weather is so different, and that's something that I think makes taking photos really valuable, because you can compare season to season and realize, like last year we were unseasonably warm. This year I think we're actually more on schedule for what winter is supposed to be like. Speaking of winter fragrance, this is one of my favorite winter interest plants because I love to bring these blooms into my house because they smell like lemon pledge, and I like that smell. This is a hybrid. This is Lonicera purpussii Winter Beauty, and the one I have at home is a rooted cutting from this plant. And what I really like about it is that it doesn't thicket as badly as some of the other, you know, woody honeysuckles will, so it's pretty easy to maintain as kind of a multi-branched shrub. I was hoping that Quasimodo would be in bloom, but it's not. But this is a really cool little dwarf witch hazel. One thing about the Arboretum is they've got great signage, and I really strongly believe in using botanical Latin because I think it gives you so much more information. And this is a great interactive sign just to explain what all those words mean and why they're important. This Chimonanthus praecox luteus. And this is why you want to buy a named variety of the sweet, winter sweet, because look at how amazing these yellow flowers are. And notice this plant has dropped all of its leaves. So you can actually see the blooms because the branches are bare. And that's a really important quality in a plant that flowers in the middle of January. Here in Zone 7, we actually have a handful of palms that do really well, including Rhipidophyllum hystrix. And that is a really nice mature specimen. And then we also have great winter active things like Arum italicum. And these actually just emerge out of the ground, and they will ultimately set red berries in late spring and then go dormant for the rest of the summer. So now I'm in a really shady pocket, and I have to say, Aspidistra was one of those plants that when I first moved to North Carolina, it knocked my socks off. And this is a cultivar called Asahi. And I learned early on, when you're growing this, particularly in a nursery setting where it's standard that you add fertilizer, that variegation will actually disappear with the addition of nitrogen. So this is a great example of a plant that does much better without additional fertility. What I love about winter interest is that, it spans the gamut from flowers to broadleaf evergreens, even to tardily deciduous plants like this Lindera angustifolia. And then of course you have really incredible colored bark that you get on, a lot of various maples, but also birches and all kinds of plants. Here in the winter garden, you've got things that are here for their form. That's the hairy lauder's walking stick. And then another contorted plant next to it, that's Poncirus trifoliata flying dragon. And all of that looks so good with this Florida Sunshine Elysium literally glowing in the forefront. Being a native Michigander, I have a thing for conifers. When I first moved to North Carolina, I was kind of under the impression that we couldn't grow them very well. But once I started coming to the Ralston Arboretum, I discovered otherwise. And though we don't grow a lot of the same things that people have in the Northeast, we do have an active American Conifer Society, and here at the Arboretum, they actually have a reference collection. So of course, camellias are near and dear to my heart. I specialized in growing these for a long time. And behind me here is a wonderful variety called Yume. And one of the interesting things about this interspecific hybrid is that it has these heart-shaped bicolor petals. And of course, they're blooming now in the middle of January. Now, a few years ago, my friends at the Camellia shop down in Savannah, Georgia, were doing some breeding with seed off of Yume, and they actually named a variety for me, Camellia brie, and it's a solid pink version of Yume that has a similar form and a super floriferous habit. This is one of the areas of the Ralston Arboretum where the whole collection is all in one space. So it's super easy to walk around and compare the size and habit of everything here in their conifer collection. The Arboretum offers so much to be able to learn and get inspired from, and just knowing that it's kind of an experimental ground. The people who work here are always, testing the limits of plants. They're not, excessively fertilizing or irrigating. What they are trying to do here is really, prove a plant's toughness. And I appreciate that they've done the trialing work so that as a consumer, I can make better decisions. As you can see, the Ralston Arboretum is an urban garden. It's literally right next to a giant highway that's getting expanded right now. And gardens like this are so important because they do provide this respite from, you know, generally overdeveloped areas that we all live in. And I love how the juxtaposition of this garden to a busy highway it's just such a different experience to have. Now, as I'm walking in here, this is one of my favorite areas. This is the children's garden, and they have a fantastic children's gardening program here, gardening education. They built this yurt, which is so much fun, and it's such a practical structure to have because it's, you know, inexpensive and affords them a lot of space. And though through COVID they haven't been able to have live events, they are doing a lot of stuff virtually. And I'm excited that I have about 6 webinars coming up with the Ralston Arboretum late winter into spring. So if you've never gone to their website, check it out. It's jcra.edu. So the staff at the Arboretum has been busy all through the pandemic, making big improvements, including these really nice walkways. You know, they have some big plans for redevelopment of this property, and they're just such conscious stewards, and there's so much to learn from the team here, and I just feel very grateful to have this as a resource in the area that I live. A few more iconic plants from the J.C. Ralston include these dwarf loblolly pines, and these have long been coveted. They're quite difficult to produce. They have to be grafted, and even then the percentages are really low. So if you ever get your hands on one of these, consider yourself fortunate. I'm feeling really nostalgic as I'm here today. It's kind of weird because I'm like the only person here. And I'm remembering when these plants were put in. Like this magnolia was planted in 2012, and it was like a 1-gallon plant. I can't believe how big it is. And gosh, gardens can certainly remind you of how fast time passes. So I just wanted to do a walk through the Lath house. The Lath house is a great example of a big experimental station. Tim was explaining to us earlier that they often will put plants in here that they don't know exactly the conditions that they want, because as you can see, all of the beds are raised, so they've got really good drainage, and it's slightly protected because of the structure, and it's basically part sun, part shade. You know, it's bright in here, but it's certainly not, you know, full blazing sun. So that gives them the opportunity to grow a lot of really cool, unique plants and to grow them successfully. You know, Daphnes are notorious for, like, you sneeze and they die. But here in the Lath house, they actually have assembled quite a beautiful collection of variegated varieties that haven't died. That's amazing. So, you know, as a plant maybe overgrows its space, they'll often transplant it or propagate off of it and then site it in a different part of the garden. Again, looking more at some Daphnes. Here is, thankfully they have everything labeled because I don't remember all these Daphne names. I don't see a label on that, but look at that one. That's a beautiful cultivar. I guess the commonly referred to as Rebecca. That's absolutely exquisite. I feel like if I was to spend $200 on that plant, I would kill it within 2 weeks. Check out the buds on this Rhodolia henryi. This is such a cool broadleaf evergreen. This actually will grow pretty well even into zone 6, so this isn't like super tender from cold, but here in this raised bed in this Lath house, it's just the happiest plant that I've ever seen. I totally don't mean to be making a video all about Daphnes that generally don't live, but look at that. It's so beautiful. It's absolutely exquisite. I just try to remember to enjoy these plants in other people's gardens so that I don't spend a lot of money and then have them die and then I feel like a failure. So, you know, there's a lesson from Bree. So I do kind of like weird plants. That's just 20 years of working in this business. I like unusual things, and when I was propagating full time, this was my favorite holly to produce. This is Ilex Buergii. And you can see those are those little flowers starting to form, and it's just an amazing, really dense but quite tall growing holly. I think this is one of those plants that if it wasn't stuck in the collector's market, it would be, you know, used as a screen between houses and neighborhoods. It's just a perfect plant. So the Ralston Arboretum has one of the best aspidistra collections that I've seen. I've already shown you Asahi. Here is a variety called Snowcap, and I'm now kind of developing an obsession. I don't have any aspidistras currently at my house, and that's gonna now be my new 2021 plant obsession. I'm gonna start collecting these. So a stroll through Asian Valley. This was always an area where I collected a lot of material from, because remember, I specialized in producing rare Asian native trees and shrubs, and I really depended on this collection to support my habit as a propagator. And then of course we would share material, so anything that I was growing that they didn't have, we would, you know, donate it to the gardens so that it would be preserved in this collection. And that's just one of the things that's so cool about horticulture, how cooperative everybody is. Now here is a Carex that I have to stop and talk about. This is Carex scaposa, and it's a relatively new introduction. And you see it just has those really like broad ribbon-like leaves, and actually these flowers are spent, but when they're in bloom they're pink, and they're really, really cool. And it's just a great low maintenance, you know, shade to part shade, very drought tolerant plant. Highly recommend it. Who says we can't grow citrus in central North Carolina? That might be citrus that doesn't taste very good, but we can grow it. I probably sound like a broken record, but I just can't believe how different 2021's weather has been compared to 2020. Last year at this time, this bridal veil Prunus mume was in full flower. I mean, it was so outrageous. And you see this year, the buds are forming, but there's not a single bloom open yet. I hope you get the gist that the Ralston Arboretum basically offers plants for everyone. You know, from shade borders to full sun. You walk into this xeric space and you kind of feel like you've been transported to Arizona. And that just shows the diversity of the plant material that can be cultivated here in Zone 7. And this arboretum is just such a treasure to be able to teach people exactly all the opportunities that lie ahead as a gardener. You'll never be bored because you'll never be able to collect all the plants. And check out this winter blooming iris. This is Iris ingricularis, and it's a great plant because it really likes to be in super dry conditions, and it blooms in the middle of January. I hope you've enjoyed this quick impromptu tour of the J.C. Ralston Arboretum. If you want to see a properly filmed and edited version of this, go over to No Rules Gardening and give us a subscribe. New videos will be up soon. Thanks so much for watching.